Hello, everyone. I'm Amanda Ziadeh with WashingtonExec, and with me today is Gary Shiffman. He's CEO and founder of Giant Oak. Thank you so much for joining us again, Gary.
Hi, Amanda. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
Of course, so we're catching up today to talk proper screening using advanced technology and why it's so important to prevent fraud. So before we jump into the specifics, I wanted to first ask, Gary, if you can briefly describe some of those technological advancements in screening.
Great. That's a great place to start. So we live obviously in an era of big data, but we live in an era of machine learning and artificial intelligence. And this is just radically transforming the way we think about so many tasks in our day-to-day lives. No reason to think that it's not going to radically transform screening. And here's the big idea, which is screening has typically been static in the sense that there's a limited universe of data, and based upon that data, we create lists. And so screening is about name matching against curated lists. And that's actually a huge waste of time, money, and resources because the list never works twice. Think about that. If you're on a list and you get caught once, you don't try to commit the same crime or take the same action because you got caught once already because your name's on the list. So lists are foolish and inefficient, and they work once but not twice, and they don't work with clever, smart, kind of successful bad actors. And we're at the point now where we have the ability to leapfrog the static world of lists for screening, and it's time we did that.
Right, makes sense. So following Congress's recent passing of the new COVID-19 relief package, why is proper screening using this advanced technology so important to prevent the possible fraud that could be occurring?
Oh my gosh, I think 2020 goes into the history books for a lot of different reasons. And one that is not often talked about is it's going to be a year of a massive spike in fraud. Mm-hmm. And that's because the US government is putting out, trillions of dollars in COVID related relief dollars, the CARES Act and follow on. And then countries around the world are doing the same. Mm-hmm. And this is important and needed money. Don't get me wrong, I'm totally in favor of it, but we're not screening before we're giving the money out. The reason we're not screening is because screening is so inefficient and ineffective. There's no point in screening if you're just doing static list matching. And so there's this massive influx of new fraud, large-scale fraud. And to be honest, a lot of new fraudsters have come into the market. People who never committed fraud in the past are now entering the fraud market. And the technology exists with machine learning and AI. We're foolish not to update our systems as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So how did this past year's experience with fraud lead to a higher need for security, clearance reform, and DHS screening?
Great question. So just in terms of the PPP fraud, we did a study based upon the roughly 70 cases filed by the Department of Justice for PPP fraud. We ran those cases through Ghost, which is our platform for screening at Giant Oak, and a full 20%, 25% of those cases, had they been screened using a machine learning platform, would have never been approved. So if you look at, if you do list-based screening, they got approved if the screening happened at all. But if they had been screened in a dynamic machine learning based environment, never would have been approved. And that's 25%. So think about of all of the loans approved in the PPP example, if 20% of those are fraudulent, I mean, that's a lot of money. It adds up very, very quickly. And that's why that was the lesson of 2020 is we have to screen in a dynamic environment. And the technology exists.
Right. And, that is taking away from the fund itself that could go towards.
Absolutely. These funds are appropriately being, in my opinion, appropriated by Congress to Treasury, to the Small Business Administration, because, hey, I run a small business. I know what 2020 was like for my peers in the small business world. And I had it much better than most. The government, for public health reasons, imposed lockdowns on the economy. Small businesses needed relief. This money has to get quickly into the hands of small businesses. But that doesn't mean we should turn away to risks and fraud, and we can do both simultaneously.
Absolutely. So what do you recommend for 21 going forward? How should agencies be assuring that they have the proper screening in place to reform the process? And continually, what steps can they take, considering the procurement of technology in government isn't usually as fast as it needs to be sometimes?
Yeah, great question. So first of all, the good news is that technology exists. It's commercial, off the shelf. My own company, Giant Oak, we have Ghost, but there are others out there. It's COTS technology. The government knows how to buy COTS technology quickly. You can go to GSA schedules. You can go to BPAs. You can go to your lead systems integrators and have them use ODCs on an existing contract to bring in COTS technologies. So that shouldn't be the challenge. It's about being open to the change in perspective made available by machine learning. And what that is, if I could just talk about that for a second, instead of static lists and name matching, what you're now doing is you're looking across the entire domain of publicly available information. So that recorded human history is happening today in internet space. That's where you want to look. The only reason you don't look there today is because it's really expensive to hire hundreds or thousands of people and give them the Google search bar. What Ghost does, for example, is it re-indexes the internet for purposes of fraud and screening. And so you can run entire populations through Ghost, and it does the prioritization for you. Prioritization is what machine learning does exceptionally well. Prioritization. Then humans step in and do that last mile and do the adjudication and do the decision making. So you're talking about looking at patterns of behavior across massive amounts of data for screening, not looking at small amounts of data and name matching on lists. And that's the paradigm shift or the perspective shift that we need to engage in 2021.
Well, thank you for sharing this with us today and talking about this with us. Hopefully we see less fraud this year than what occurred last year.
Thanks, Amanda. And just a shout out, WashingtonExec's awesome organization. Very grateful to all the support they've given to Giant Oak through the years and happy to be a part of this. So thanks for reaching out and for the talk today.